Hello everyone, my name is Zach Lafone. I'm a local indie developer out of Lowell, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to be showing you a month of progress on my newest project, NicPatrol. NicPatrol is a game about a school in the midst of a vaping epidemic. You play as a school administrator recently hired to solve the nicotine-laced problem. Your goal is to reduce the amount of nicotine use in the school, and you do this by catching vape fiends. The more you catch vapors and confiscate their supply, the more resource points you'll collect. Resource points are given to you by the school when you do something in their favor, such as punishing a student for vaping or being in the halls without a hall pass. You can spend resource points on utility items such as cameras and vape detectors, and on upgrades such as faster movement speeds and seeing around corners. So now that you know what this game is about, let's jump into the earliest build I have of this project. So here we are in the first build of the game, 30520. I built this on March 5th, 2020, and the first thing you probably notice is how bad the lighting is. I wasn't focused on visuals at this point, I was more focused on learning how Unity's AI navigation system works. The only thing the player can do is move this person by clicking on the ground. Not much to see here, so let's go into the next build. During pre-alpha for this project, I was doing nightly builds instead of a list of updates. I did it this way because I was still learning and trying to figure out how I wanted the game to be played. The next feature I worked on was the student's AI. At this point, the AI had 3 states: idle, move to a random position, and vape. The AI would pick the next state at random. Students also had 2 stats: suspicion, which is not in the current build, and rebelness. Rebelness affects the chances that the students will vape in this build. I also learned in this build that having both a dynamic rigid body and a nav mesh agent on a game object is a bad combination. The reason being is that it creates a race condition where both components are trying to control the position of the game object at the same time. Always set your rigid body to kinematic if you have a nav mesh on that object. This is build 30720, and as you can see, I created a basic title screen. I like to create title screens for the early builds of my games because it gives me more of a sense that I'm creating an actual game and not some tech demo. Clicking on new game launches you into the game. I completely scrapped how the AI worked from yesterday and started working on a new system. The student AI in this game is based on a task queue system. Tasks are set behaviors that the students will do, such as moving to a position or vaping. The AI loads tasks into a queue, and the task at the front of the queue is updated. When the task is finished, a done flag is set, and the AI bumps it out of the queue for the next task to take its place. Students in this build spawn from the entrance door and go to the schedule class. They also might stop in the hallways to vape. After a certain amount of time, the period ends, and the player is greeted with a screen to go to the next period. The students then spawn out of the last period class door and make their way to the next schedule class. In the next build, I started implementing the school's layout. My sister actually designed this map using Excel, and I think it turned out nicely. The layout is largely unchanged in the current build of the game. The early days of this project were heavily devoted to the student's AI. I was enjoying writing the AI for the first week of development, but after that, the complexity grew to a point where it was a chore to implement new features. Luckily, the task queue system I created made the work somewhat easy. In this build of the game, I implemented vape spots, which are locations around the campus that the students go to vape. I created a new AI task that searches for the nearest vape spot and goes to it. If that vape spot is occupied, the students will go to the next closest spot, and so on. Unfortunately, this creates a conga line of students looking for a spot to vape, which gives away which students are vaping. The player could also click on the students that were visible to confiscate their vapes. This increases the counter on the lower left of the screen. Also, in this build, I took out the screen at the end of each period and made the game more continuous. I added a clock to the top right of the screen to show the player the in-game time. Because the core game loop was in place, I decided that this was the last build of pre-alpha. To spice up the game a little, I added a company logo splash screen to the start of the game. 0.1 was really about fixing all the bugs left over from the previous build. Not much has changed other than the game being called an alpha now. In 0.2 I added player-student interactions. Now when the player clicks on the student will stop and turn towards the player, and a pop-up will appear. If the player interacts with the student who is currently vaping, a button will appear to confiscate their supply. For fun, I also created a shader that waves a mesh up and down, like a sine wave. When applied to a plain mesh, it sort of looks like vapor waves, so I added that effect to when the students are vaping nearby. In the next version, 0.3.1, I decided on a color palette for the game. I wanted the graphics to look flat and almost 2D, so I picked a color palette so the colors of the game look nice with each other. The blue of the skybox is a color from this palette, and so are the dark blues between the halls. The big feature of this build was the day now ends after 8 in-game hours, and the game saves. To do saving, I created a serializable game save data class that holds information about how many vapes are confiscated and the current day. The class that holds information about a student was also made serializable, and both an array of student info objects and the game save data object are saved to disk at the end of the day. Version 0.4.1 focused on allowing students to leave class to head to vape spots. There's really nothing to do when the students are in class, so this gives the player something to do. If the student's blood nicotine content drops below an 0.2 in the middle of class, the student will leave class and cruise for a vape spot. For this game, I wanted to share my progress early on in the development, so I decided at this point to create an open alpha on itch.io. I really wish I waited longer for this, because most of the traffic a game gets on itch.io comes from the new and popular sections, until your game gets popular enough to be in the popular section. The game never made it to the popular section, and I think this had to do with people not wanting to play a very unfinished game. Even though the core game loop was in place, catching vapors, the game needed a lot more features to be fun or at least interesting to play. In the future, I'll probably push what I consider alpha back until the game is at least fun, and only post those builds on itch.io. That would do it for part 1 of this video. Part 2 will be uploaded on Monday, April 5th, and will cover the rest of the progress up to the current build of the game. Please follow me at ZacharyBuffon on Twitter to receive updates on current projects and future projects. See you in the next video.